here's something crazy about the whole obedience in advance thing. Colonial Williamsburg has removed its website dedicated to an honest history of the American Revolution. And they did that just within the last couple of days. Why do I know that? Because I built that website and I wrote almost all of the content for it about 14 years ago. It was the first thing I did at Colonial Williamsburg. I was the digital historian, and we wanted to provide a reliable resource online to send not just our interpreters, but to send our guests to, so they could get a solid foundation in what the American Revolution was, its context, its causes, its character, and its consequences. It was funded by a major grant for the National Endowment for the Humanities, and it was contributed by many major historians of the American Revolution in a number of different ways, from a number of different perspectives. And it stood the test of time and critique. But in the last week, it has been not just changed, it has been removed. So if you go to ouramericanrevolution.org, you will now just be directed to random links on the Colonial Williamsburg Library page, not to the broad website that we created, and that I oversaw and wrote most of the content for, about an honest take on the American Revolution. And it wasn't just me; it was contributions from more than a dozen of the major historians of the American Revolution from a number of different perspectives, from Black history and slavery to Indigenous Americans to military history to diplomacy, as well as biographies of all of the major figures. And the broader historical background of slavery and its relationship, slavery and Indigenous people and Indigenous relations and their relationship to the coming of the American Revolution. What's there now? Nothing. We talk about obedience in advance, ripping apart a major resource for an honest understanding of the American Revolution. I'd say that counts. Be careful who you trust. But the benefit is I kept all that stuff. So it's all mine again. So I think that maybe another website's coming out.
Welcome to the Jaybefaunt channel. I am your host, JamesBFauntleroy. So good to see all of you here. Good to have you back for this reading. I am getting ready to get back into my reading like I should. So thank you very much to everybody for tuning in for this special reading today. If you guys have not already, go ahead and give a like to the stream. This helps me out very much, be able to reach more people. So I thank you so very much for that. Also, if you guys have not already, you guys can subscribe to my Substack at jaybefaunt.substack.com. This gives you email notifications whenever I go live, upload clips, or write any articles, so you have that there. Also, if you'd like to ask me any questions and I give you a actual recorded answer, then you guys can actually go to QBounty at qbounty.com/Jaybefaunt. And also, it's the holidays, so if you guys like to gift this subscription to my Patreon, you can also do that as well. So why are we here? Well, you guys know exactly why we're here. Let's get into this. We are talking Prejudential, doing the reading and discussion. Prejudential, Black America and the Presidents by Margaret Kimberly. We're going to be getting into sections 12 to 15. So this is going to be a really good reading. This is going to be some insights into the former presidents and how they relate to Black America. I cannot wait to get into this. We're going to be starting here on number 12. So, ready to get into it? So we're going to be starting in number 12. We're going to be starting in Zachary Taylor, which is on page 50. So Zachary Taylor, 12th president of the United States. And he was president from 1849 to 1850. Let's see what that's about. Zachary Taylor served in office for only 18 months. He was inaugurated on March 5th, 1849, and he died on July 9th, 1850. Some historians say that eating raw fruit and milk on a hot day killed him. Others say that it was cholera, yet others believe that he was poisoned. While this may not matter to the topic at hand, what does matter is that Taylor joined the ranks of presidents who committed genocide. Exterminating Indians ran in his bloodline, and slaveholding was a family business for generations. Manifest Destiny was also part of Taylor's legacy. Taylor was born in Virginia in 1784 to a family designated as aristocratic in a country meant to be a haven from aristocracy. He was a descendant of William Brewster, a leader of Plymouth Colony, where the settler project began. Taylor's second cousin was James Madison. He was also related to Robert E. Lee and his clan. In the state of Virginia, words like wealthy and aristocrat were synonymous with slaveholding, and Zachary Taylor was guilty on all counts. His father, Richard Taylor, served in the Revolutionary War, which, as demonstrated earlier, was motivated in large part by a desire for Americans to maintain slavery and accelerate the stealing of Indian land. He was handsomely rewarded for the effort, receiving a war bonus of 6,000 acres of land located in Western Virginia in a region that is now the state of Kentucky. In 1790, the elder Taylor owned 7 slaves. The number had risen to 26 by 1800 and 37 by 1810. As an army officer, Zachary Taylor rose to the rank of general as he fought the indigenous Sac and Fox Nation in the Black Hawk War and the Seminole tribes in the Florida War, driving them from their lands. He fought in the Mexican War, which reduced the country's territory by half and doubled the size of the United States. Taylor held approximately 200 people in bondage at the time of his greatest plantation wealth. Over the course of his life, he brought and sold others to an unknown degree. Sounds like this guy is pretty much part and parcel of what we thought, well, we think of presidents. You know, he's the, prime representation of what we think of them, for the most part. As a plantation owner in Kentucky, Louisiana, and Mississippi, Taylor left his children a great fortune. One gained at the expense of chattel slaves. He always complained that business was bad, that floods washed away his crops, and that he never made as much money as he wanted. Known as Old Rough and Ready for his success in killing and relocating Seminoles, he returned to the United States in 1847, intending to continue making a fortune from his unpaid laborers. Sounds like, yeah, a lot of times you'll get some people who are billionaires and ultra rich and very wealthy, and they always talk about, oh, I didn't make that much, and I don't have enough money, and I'm technically broke. Always claiming that they're broke when they got all that. Crazy. In 1840, he purchased the Cypress Grove Plantation, a 1,923-acre tract of land located in Jefferson County, Mississippi. The price of $95,000, $60,000 in cash, and $35,000 in notes was a considerable sum of money for his time. He brought not only land, but 81 humans as well. Most of that county's people, some 80%, were enslaved. 80% of the county were enslaved. 80%. Wow. There's strength in numbers, y'all. At the time of his death in 1850, Taylor owned 127 enslaved people on the plantation. In 1850, only 1,733 slaveholders, roughly 0.5% of all the slaveholders of the nation, owned more than 100 people each. Seems like the whole issue of the 1% is quite old. The 12th president of the United States should be remembered for more than dying unexpectedly. The same authors who provide useful information about the degree of his slaveholding also maintain that his servants were as well treated as their welfare as carefully considered as any in the South. Each slave received fresh milk daily, as was issued a pound of meat on an average day. Indians struggling to keep their lands resisted as long as they could, but those same authors called them savages. Taylor and other presidents are still revered, no matter how unsavory their conduct. New Hampshire's Independent Democrat quite accurately described Taylor as an 1848 editorial as one of the greatest slaveholders in the United States, who raised babies for the markets and makes merchandise of his fellow men. He had 100 mothers with or without babies for sales in the shambles. He furnished Creole virgins for the hells of New Orleans and riots on the ruins of souls for whom the man of sorrows died. This 19th century newspaper does a better job of describing how Taylor made his fortune than do many 20th and 21st century biographers. Taylor is a paradox in that he wanted to keep anti-slavery Northerners happy. He was chosen as the Whig nominee to keep Southerners happy, Whig as in W-H-I-G. But he was not as malleable as the powers that be had hoped. He insisted that the California and New Mexico be admitted to the Union directly, skipping the process of becoming territories. This decision made it possible for 2 new anti-slavery states to be admitted to the Union, but only because Taylor knew these new territories were unsuitable for large-scale cultivation of sugar and cotton and would never have viable plantation economies. He said as much in a letter to his former son-in-law, Jefferson Davis, who had served under him in the Black Hawk War and would go on to become president of the Confederate States. This Wilmot question should never have been agitated. Nature has so arranged matters in its regards to ceded territory, which will prevent the existence of slavery in any portion of it. For no one while his senses will carry his slaves there unless he wishes them to go out of the reach of some civil process. This proviso was gotten up with no other object but to array the North against the South, and I much fear its injurious effects before it is finally disposed of, but I hope for the best. Kind of sounded like Mark Warner there for a second. Senator Mark Warner. Slavery lasted for the United States as long as it did because of the compromise between abetting sides, keeping an even number of slave and free states, banning the discussion of slavery in Congress, passing fugitive slave laws, and determining at which latitude slavery would begin and end. The country's rulers used many tricks to keep slavery a viable and profitable institution. So yeah, this kind of reminds me now about healthcare, right? We know that giving healthcare as a human right and nationalize healthcare would actually be the best system for all. But in order to keep the 1%, the rich, the affluent, the wealthy, in order to keep them happy, you have to keep that predatory system in place, even though you know it is a predatory and decrepit system, because you want to keep certain people happy, even though it really should be the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. but they're so focused on keeping the few happy that they're willing to throw the many under the bus. Why are these facts not widely discussed today? The United States still basks in the glory of a romanticized past. If white people had the right at the time to kill Indians and take their lands and turn those lands over to the plantation economy, then they probably harbor related feelings of entitlement today. If the institution of slavery and its aftermath aren't examined, the objective truths like the inordinate number of blacks being killed by police won't be questioned either. If people like Taylor could steal half of Mexico and be labeled heroic, then modern day presidents can invade nations, change regimes, and kill with mechanized drones and be considered heroic too. Today's propaganda differs little from that of Taylor's era. In fact, it relies on it. If the past is examined through a microscope, then the present must be as well. And that would create cognitive dissonance. We may ponder on the ubiquity of white privilege in the 21st century, but its existence isn't a mystery. It is exacerbated when the truth of Zachary Taylor's and other presidents' roles maintain the chattel slavery system is kept hidden. Every single time a white person bristles at any type of teaching about chattel slavery, teaching about the horrors of Jim Crow, the teaching of, critical race theory, anything involving how my ancestors were treated. You're contributing to the ignorance of the nation so that they will repeat the same sins and transgressions of the past. You're allowing for that to happen. You're holding that door open. I don't want my kids to feel bad. But the thing is, it's like that bad feel. Look, damn it, let me say this. Your kids, if they're white, they need to feel bad. Why? Because they need to have that negative feeling during their formative years so that they know how wrong it is. And so then when they grow up, they walk away from that trend forevermore. And they treat and they teach that trend, that feeling to their children as well, so that it doesn't happen again. When will we start saying never again to chattel slavery? Look, the 13th Amendment still allows for slavery. It does, right? There's an exception in there for it. If there was still an exception for Holocaust-like conditions for Jewish people in Germany, there would be outcry so loud that it would never stop. And yet, they outlawed it. Yet we tacitly outlaw chattel slavery, tacitly in certain sectors of society. And other sectors of society, we keep it around. This is why we as Black people and Black Americans especially say that you no longer have to just be, oh, I don't see color, or you can't just be not racist. You have to be anti-racist. You can't be neutral. There's no neutral. You have to neutralize the threat. You have to be the complete opposite. If slavery is an acid, then you got to be a base. You can't be water in between. That is how it is. You have to be the anti of whatever is wrong. You cannot ride the fence, because if you ride the fence, you're going to fall either on one side or the other. And we can no longer take that risk. That's one of the issues as to why Black people are as forceful as we are about these things. It could be either the overt or the covert racism. It could be the macroaggressions or the microaggressions. It's still on the wrong side of history. And this is why somebody like me not only goes after the Republican Party, but I also go after the Democratic Party, because both parties contribute to pushing us back into that direction. They push us back into that direction because one side will be overt and their disdain for people like me. The other side will be covert in their disdain for people like me. And they don't believe in actual liberation for us or any type of equal and equitable recompense and restitution for us in order for a true equalizing to take place. This is why it is important for especially white people, white Americans, to not only learn about the sins of the past, but also you got to let your kids know how the sausage is made. If me at the age of 4, 5, and 6, if I can learn racism because how racist people treat me, then you can teach age appropriately to children what racism is at that same age of how bad it is and how they need to run away from it. You're not harming them and you're not damaging your children. You're actually teaching them that the fire is hot. You're teaching your children that it is wrong. You're teaching them, look, some of y'all who are religious, train up a boy according to the way. So even when he grows old, he may not turn aside from it. This is exactly what it is. And I'm going to be real. Be real for a second. I wasn't expecting to say this, but it is. This is also why some of us Black people on the left also have to hold white people on the left at arm's length. Because some of y'all, even on the left, still don't completely get it. So this is why it is important to teach the sins of the past, as well as, and you got to recognize this, that class and race are so intertwined that they're really mirrors of each other when it comes to us, because that's how the system is built. And until we completely dismantle this system, and even when the system is dismantled, you have to treat race as class and class as race, because that's how this system built it. Until we make a complete system where identity doesn't matter at all, that's what has to happen. That's why that equity and equality has to happen simultaneously. This is why we talk about reparations for African descendants of slavery, freedmen, because it's literally a class issue. But also, you're going to see that if reparations was implemented, yes, it'd be based on lineage, but when you look at all the people who it affects, it's going to be people that look like this. This is why intersectionality is important for Marxists to learn. I know some Marxists don't like that. I don't agree with intersectionality. Well, you better start getting used to it, because reparations for American descendants of slavery is actually a Marxist value. We can have that debate if you want to. I don't like debating. We can have that discussion. But shall we continue? Yeah, let's continue. Number 13, Millard Fillmore, president number 13, lucky number 13. He was president from 1850 to 1853. Millard Fillmore was the vice presidential candidate in the 1848 ticket because his running mate, Zachary Taylor, was a slave-holding Southerner. Fillmore was one of a long line of Northerners who gave in to the slave owners out of political expediency and his own covertly racist beliefs. As a newly elected congressman in 1838, Fillmore favored abolishing slavery in the District of Columbia. He voted to allow congressional debate and opposed the annexation of Texas. In 1846, he called the Mexican War a wild and wicked scheme of foreign conquest meant to add another slave territory to the United States. But as the new president in 1850, Fillmore signed the Fugitive Slave Act into law and said there was no need to amend it in any way to protect free people from being kidnapped and sold in the South. Like fellow Northerner John Adams, he feared that the presence of free Black people in the country would lead to a slave insurrection, like the one that had given Haiti its independence 50 years earlier. You know, it's funny. Why did they fear an insurrection if they thought that slavery was actually a positive thing? Because they knew it was wrong. You only fear the reaction because you know it's wrong. That's why they feared an insurrection. So when people go, oh, well, that was just the way it was back in the day. It was just the times, you know, that's how they did it. No. Because that fear was because they knew it was wrong. They knew it was wrong, and we knew it was wrong. So therefore, this is why it happened. This is why they actually came up with a diagnosis called drapetomania, which is basically a diagnosis of Black people who wanted freedom. That was considered a mental illness back in the day. So they knew it was wrong. Let's continue. He finally said that slavery should end, but only on the condition that Black people be repatriated back to Africa. The only good thing about the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 is that it hastened the beginning of the Civil War and thus the end of slavery. It brought the evil of slavery home to Northerners who thought they could escape it. The name of the act is a rather bland description that doesn't tell the story of how it exacerbated tensions between North and South. It was not the first fugitive slave law. That one was dated in 1793. Like its predecessor, the new version allowed for fugitives to be recaptured and sent back to their slaveholders. The scope of the 1850 legislation is what made it so vile. Not only did it give slaveholders the right to recapture their human property, but it also forced Northerners to assist in committing an act that many of them considered to be criminal. A marshal who did not assist in the capture of a fugitive could be fined up to $1,000. Anyone aiding a fugitive could also be fined $1,000 or sentenced to 6 months in jail. The captured person had no right to trial and could not testify on his or her own behalf. A portion of Fillmore's 1852 message to Congress was suppressed. but it was saved and lives on as Mr. Fillmore's views relating to slavery, the suppressed portion of the third annual message to Congress, December 6, 1852. In this text, Fillmore claims to think slavery as, in this text, Fillmore claims to think slavery an evil, but he concludes that it cannot be abolished and that Black people, free and enslaved, should be sent away lest they be exterminated in a race war. I see no remedy but by colonizing the free Blacks either in Africa or in the West Indies or both. This, it appears to me, is all that Congress can do. Fillmore was not the last pro-slavery Northerner, and his immediate successors, Franklin Pierce and James Buchanan, continued in the same vein of placating the South. Compromise and court cases were ultimately unable to keep the nation from splitting into two and going to war. Well, let's move on. So that was Millard Fillmore. That Fugitive Slave Act was vicious. I'm telling you, man. And the crazy part is, it's like, okay, if we only free them, we can only free them, and we'll have them shipped back to Africa, right? We'll only deport them back to Africa. History may not repeat itself, but it damn sure rhymes. Because this country allowed all these undocumented immigrants to come here. And what did the United States do? They destabilized their countries, caused the destabilization to make a whole bunch of undocumented immigrants flee their countries to come here. And they have been undocumented for years, right? And now they're saying the only way that we can actually fix this situation is by shipping them back to their country. We can't allow them to be citizens here, even though they're already in this country. We can't do that. We got to ship them back. That's the only thing we can do. They said the same damn thing about my ancestors. It is, history may not repeat itself, but it damn sure rhymes. Because you have another group of exploited people that really, they're being pushed to come here. They're being pushed to come here. And I know some people are going to get mad at me for saying that. They're like, well, they made the choice to come here. Yeah, but it was under duress. See what I mean? It's not like it was a free choice. It was a choice under duress to come here. Because it was either that or suffer and die. Why? Because of the destabilization that this government is doing to them. And so by the time they get here, they agree to be exploited because they'd rather be exploited here than suffer in their countries under the destabilization. So they do that. And now, after this country got the use out of them that they needed, now it's like, okay, some of our citizens are getting antsy about having you guys here, so we're going to have to, send you guys, pack you guys up and send you home. And even Donald Trump is saying things like, well, we're not going to break up the families. We're just going to send all the families together and ship them off. Even people who have been here for decades and decades and decades, who came here as children. Even if your kids are citizens of this country, they're getting shipped away too. This is not just for brown immigrants. It's also for Black immigrants. And what if What if some of us have family that are Black immigrants and we don't want our families to be broken up? What if those immigrant families are mixed between Black immigrants and Black American? What's going to happen to some of those Black Americans? Are they going to get shipped off to a country they've never been to? Let's move on. Number 14, Franklin Pierce, 14th President of the United States from 1853 to 1857. Franklin Pierce was among the northern members of the Democratic Party who unquestionably served the slave owners. His Secretary of War, a close friend, was Jefferson Davis. That names keep coming up, right? The future president of the Confederate Rebellion. The Missouri Compromise of 1820, which was once loved by slave powers, was cast aside in favor of the 1854 Kansas-Nebraska Act, which Pierce drafted along with Senator Stephen A. Douglas of Illinois. It allowed new states to determine whether they would be of soil for the slaveocracy based on the concept of popular sovereignty. It upended the doctrine of balance, compromises of the sort that led to the creation of two houses of Congress, one that had an equal number of members per state, the Senate, and the other that gave states representation based on population, the House of Representatives. Since the Missouri Compromise, there have been no new slave states admitted to the Union without another free soil state being admitted as well. During his 4-year term, Pierce sought to expand slavery not just in the United States, but in the Caribbean and Central America as well. He recognized a renegade government established by William Walker, an outlaw American filibuster, someone who instigates military actions in foreign countries without the official support of the U.S. government, but often with its approval and support, living in Nicaragua. This sounds like Blackwater. Remember Eric Prince? The brother of former Education Secretary Betsy DeVos? Doing covert operations outside of the guise of the U.S. military. They're private mercenaries that are doing work just so happens to be on behalf of the United States, but they're not the United States. Sounds like that, right? History may not repeat, but rhymes. Walker was a Tennessean with a predilection for grandiose scheming, who briefly held territory in Mexico before deciding to make himself president of Nicaragua and reinstate slavery, which had been abolished there 30 years earlier. Walker was eventually undone, but the powerful slavery system was eager for more territory. When he wasn't giving a free hand to Walker and other filibusters, Pierce was trying to obtain other countries. Oh, this guy was a real colonialist. He offered Spain $100 million to purchase Cuba, but the offer came with a threat of annexation if Spain didn't agree to terms. Cuba was just 90 miles from Florida and had centuries-old slave-based plantation economy that Southerners wanted to make their own. The diplomat Pierce chose for the job was the very undiplomatic Pierre Soule. Soule made no secret of his intentions, killed the French ambassador in a duel, and also killed the plan when it became public. As war approached, Pierce again wrote to his friend Jefferson Davis in 1860 and spoke of a hope to overthrow political abolitionism at the polls. This letter was discovered at Davis' home by Union troops and was used to accuse Pierce of disloyalty. The accusation was all too true. Pierce was pro-Confederate and deserve the denunciation. All right. We're already done with that one. Let's go to number 15, James Buchanan. A man that I wish I did not have to share a name with, but here we are. James Buchanan was president from 1857 to 1861. James Buchanan was a Northerner, the only president from the state of Pennsylvania. Yet, like his predecessors, he wasn't at all interested in addressing the institution of slavery, stating in his inaugural address, "Most happy will it be for the country when the public mind shall be diverted from this question to others of more pressing and practical importance." Pressing and practical importance? So slavery was not pressing, and it wasn't practical, and it wasn't important? With all due disrespect, James Buchanan, fuck you. Oh, jeez. In fact, he exemplified the term doughface, a reference to a Northerner with Southern sympathies. Buchanan proved himself to be the worst doughface of all when the Supreme Court handed down the infamous Dred Scott versus Sanford decision on March 6th. Within days of his taking office, Dred Scott was enslaved to an army doctor who briefly served in the states of Illinois and Wisconsin. After the slaveholder's death, Scott sued for his freedom, claiming that his residence in those states made him a free man. Lower courts agreed with him, and Justice Robert Greer said that the court would probably decide against Scott, but narrowly on the issue of his freedom. However, Buchanan wanted more. He would not have been satisfied with Dred Scott's continued bondage alone. He hoped that the opposition to slavery would disappear once and for all, and that the white Northerners would no longer have any say in the question of slavery and its expansion. While he was still president-elect, Buchanan wrote to Justices John Caltron and Robert Greer, telling the latter, "The great object of my administration will be, if possible, to destroy the dangerous slavery agitation, and thus restore peace to our distracted country." Greer agreed with Buchanan and told him so in a letter. He stated that he, Justice James Wayne, and Chief Justice Roger Taney fully appreciate and concur with your views as to the desirableness at this time of having an expression of the opinion of the court on this troublesome question. With your concurrence, I will give you in confidence the history of the case before us, with the probable result. The court's decision stated that no black person was a citizen, whether free or enslaved, and that none had any rights a white person had to respect, including the right to bring suit in court. Buchanan had actively and unethically concluded with the federal judiciary in violation of the law. When the law became inconvenient, it was tossed aside. Buchanan got his wish in the Scott versus Sanford decision. Not only did the 7-2 result strip all black Americans of their right as citizens, but it also ruled that the Missouri Compromise of 1820 was unconstitutional because it gave the federal government jurisdiction over the question of slavery. The decision was not just a result of evil intent on the part of the 7 of the 9 Supreme Court justices. It was an attempt to remove any legal process that could end slavery. In his attempt to kill the abolitionist movement, Buchanan only strengthened it and buoyed the endless greed of the slave owners. Buchanan won the battle of the Scott versus Sanford decision, but the emboldened movement that would cost his pro-slavery brethren a war 8 years later. So essentially, they fucked around and they found out. So we reached the end. So next time we're going to start on 1862 to 1901. We're going to start on Reconstruction era. We'll be starting on the first president of the Reconstruction era, the famous Abraham Lincoln, number 16. So when we get into that, that's going to be a great discussion. I can't wait to get into that because Abraham Lincoln, everybody gives him praise, but is he really deserving of it? We'll talk about that. So that being said, just want to thank you guys for tuning in. This was a very beautiful discussion that I wanted to get into, especially because, you know, honestly, it was necessary, you know, because a lot of times, you know, we talk about the, you know, history and how it, you know, shakes hands with one another. And I think that's an important thing for us to do, you know, and how it coincides with what we see today. And so that's really important. And it's important to learn these lessons so that we see the trends and then we go, if it's a good thing that's happening, we go into that direction. If we see that it's a bad thing that's about to happen, we go in the opposite direction. That is what learning history affords us. The problem is some people just don't want to know it, or they do know it, but they want the bad to continue to happen. It's either or. We have to be on the other side and see the grotesques of, you know, our past and try to go in the opposite direction. And then the victories of the past, we try to embrace those and repeat those so that we can continue to move forward. So I appreciate that. And with that being said, go ahead and give a like to the stream. Thank you very much for that as well. So with that being said, just want to say that I would like to thank every single patron on Patreon. For without you guys, I would not be able to do this work. You guys make this possible. The work continues. So here are the tiers. Thank you so very much to patrons. And the tiers are Mega Jaybefaunters, Super Duper Jaybefaunters, Super Jaybefaunters, Jaybefaunters, Comrade, Solidarity, and JB members. And thank you to all the new members. I already thank these new members already, but thank you to all future new members. For without you guys, I would not be able to do this work. So in addition to, and furthermore, just to let you guys know, my channel is demonetized. So if you'd like to support the channel, you can support via Patreon or PayPal. Thank you so very much for that. Now, another house cleaning thing, just want to get through to. Also, we are also raising money for our mutual aid chapter here in Orlando. We're trying to get as much done for our community as possible. So if you'd like to, you can also contribute by going to Cash App at $OrlandoRBN. This helps us to be able to raise money for the funds that we're trying to raise for our unhoused community. We're doing things like toiletries for our community, and also we're trying to partner up with other mutual aid groups and organizations here in Orlando in order to help our unhoused neighbors as well. So thank you very much for that. All right. And yes, so with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this reading. I will be getting into the reading of Water in the Spirit after this, so be sure to tune in for that. We'll be starting in a brand new chapter, so I can't wait to get into that. And I just want to thank you guys for, you know, reaching out, you know, and letting me know that you guys appreciate the channel. I'm trying to grow it as much as possible so that I can help educate, because the work of education is part of revolution. And so that's what I try to be. I try to be as much of an educator and a communicator as possible to help my fellow neighbors to learn more and be better. I want to do better, and I want to be better, and I want to help others to learn to do and be better as well. So, with that being said, I'm about to head on out. My time is up. Water your plants, water yourselves, leave the world better than you found it. Smoke them if you got them, drink them if you got them. If you ain't got them, then watch something funny because joy is revolutionary, or read because reading is fundamental. Yes, absolutely. So, thank you very much. Mwah. Forehead kisses. You guys have yourself a wonderful and beautiful day. Be kind to yourself and be kind to others. Take care. Thank you so very much for watching my channel, and I deeply appreciate it from the top and bottom of my heart. If you wish to support the channel further, so I can keep bringing you content that is educational and informative, you can become a patron on patreon.com/Jaybefaunt. You can find that link in the pinned comment or in the description below. No matter what you give, you'll be supporting independent media and education that helps make the world better. Thank you so much, and you can watch more of my content here. Mwah. Forehead kisses, and have a beautiful day.